Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopidana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Gopidana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Yasodanandana Rajadana Ranjana Jaya Rajadana Ranjana Yasodanandana Rajadana Ranjana Jaya Rajadana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopidana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Gopijana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Yamunadiravarachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Yamunadiravarachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvadakasharya Asadhara Satushi Shiman His Divine Grace Klesi Bhaktivedanta Smaraj Shil Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Haribo Slava Zavrani Bhaktam Slava Shri Guru Shri Grangi Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatundeve Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskatyade Satarne Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shiguro Shiyuta Padakamalam Shigurum Vaishnavamscha Shirupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakans Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabandho Dagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanshena Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishubhanu Sudha Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapatribhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 10, The Pastimes of Lord Ramachandra, text number 50. Agrahit asanam bratra pranipatya prasaditaha prajak swadama nirata vanashrama gunanvita yugopa patrivad ramo meninor pitaram chatam agrahit asanam bratra pranipatya prasaditaha prajasvadarma nirata vanashrama gunanvitaha yugopa pitrivad ramo menire pitaram chatam. Agrahinasanam bratra pranipatya prasadita prajaswadama nirata vanashrama gunanvita yugapa patrivad ramo menire pitaram chatam. Grahidasanam bratra Sadama nirata menire pitaram chatam. Ladies, pranipatya prasaditaha prajasvadama nirata vanashrama gunanvita yugopa pitravad ramo menire pitaram chatam. Agrahit, accepted. Asanam, the throne of the state. Bratra, by his brother Bharata. Pranipatya, after fully surrendering unto him. Prasaditaha, having been pleased. Praja, and the citizens. Swadharma nirata, fully engaged in the respective occupational duties. Vanashrama, according to the system of Varna and Ashram. Gunanvita, all of them being qualified in that process. Yugopa, the Lord protected them. Pitrivat, exactly like a father. Rama, Lord Ramachandra. Mainire, they considered. Pitaram, exactly like a father. Cha, also. Tam, him, Lord Ramachandra. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Being pleased by the full surrender and submission of Lord Bharata. Lord Ramachandra then accepted the throne of the state. He cared for the citizens exactly like a father, and the citizens, being fully engaged in their occupational duties of Varna and Ashram, accepted him as their father. Purport. People are very fond of the pattern of Ram Raja. And even today, politicians sometimes form a party called Ram Raja. But unfortunately, they have no obedience to Lord Rama. It is sometimes said that people want the kingdom of God without God. Such an aspiration, however, is never to be fulfilled. Good government can exist when the relationship between the citizens and the government is like that exemplified by Lord Ramachandra and his citizens. Lord Ramachandra ruled his kingdom exactly like as a father takes care of his children, and the citizens, being obliged to the good government of Lord Ramachandra, accepted the Lord as their father. Thus, the relationship between the citizens and the government should be exactly like that between father and son. When the sons in a family are well trained, they are obedient to the father and mother, and when the father is well qualified, he takes good care of the children. It is indicated here by the words Swadharma Nirata, Varnashrama Gunanvitaha. The people who were good citizens because they accepted the institution of Varna and Ashrama, which arranges society in the Varna divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and the Ashrama divisions of Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. This is actual human civilization. People must be trained according to the different occupational, varnashram, occupational duties, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.13. Chatur varnyam maya shristam guna karma vibhagashaha. The four varnas must be established according to varying qualities and work. The first principle for good government is that it must institute this varnashram system. The purpose of varnashram is to enable people to become God conscious. Varnashrama vicharitaha purushena para puman vishnur aradhyate. The entire varnashram scheme is intended to enable people to become Vaishnavas. Vishnur asya devata. When people worship Lord Vishnu as the Supreme Lord, they become Vaishnavas. Thus people should be trained to become Vaishnavas through the system of Varna and Ashram, as they were during the reign of Lord Ramachandra, when everyone was fully trained to follow the Varnashram principles. Simply enforcing laws and ordinances cannot make the citizens obedient and lawful. This is impossible. Throughout the entire world, there are so many states, legislative assemblies, and parliaments. But still the citizens are rogues and thieves. Good citizenship, therefore, cannot be enforced. The citizens must be trained. As there are schools and colleges to train students to become chemical engineers, lawyers, or specialists in many other departments of knowledge, there must be schools and colleges to train students to become brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, shudras, brahmacharis, grihastas, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. This will provide the preliminary condition for good citizenship. Vanashrama gunanvitaha. Generally speaking, if the king or president is a rajarshi, the relationship between the citizens and the chief executive will be clear, and there will be no possibility of disruption in the state, because the number of thieves and rogues will decrease. In Kali Yuga, however, because the varnashram system is neglected, people are generally thieves and rogues. In the system of democracy, such thieves and rogues naturally collect money from other thieves and rogues. And thus there is chaos in every government, and no one is happy. But here the example of good government is to be found in the reign of Lord Ramachandra. People follow this example, then there will be good government all over the world. Translation. Being pleased by the full surrender and submission of Lord Bharata, Lord Ramachandra then accepted the throne of the state. He cared for the citizens exactly like a father, and the citizens, being fully engaged in their occupational duties, of Varna and Ashrama, accepted him as their father. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Shinivadi Paskadyade Satarane. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Prabhupada cites the verse in the Adi Leela, chapter 1, verse number 45. Charyamam vijaniyam navamanite karichit namartya buddha sudeta sarvadeva mayo guru. One should know the Acharya is myself, and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is the representative of all the demigods. So Prabhupada explains that this is a verse from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by Lord Krishna, when he was asked by Uddhava about the four social and spiritual orders of society. So, the Lord specifically was explaining how a brahmachari is trained under the direction of a spiritual master. And Prabhupada writes here, a spiritual master is not an enjoyer of the facilities offered by his disciples. He is like a parent. Without the attentive service of his parents, the child cannot grow to manhood. Similarly, without the care of the spiritual master, one cannot rise to the plane of transcendental service. Therefore, although it seems like there's some kind of distinction between the varnashram system and the spiritual system of swadharma, there's two types of swadharma. Ultimately dharma means occupational duty, or what is the reality of this world and how it works and how we can live in harmony with it. What are the dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam? Krishna is explained in the Vedas. He originally breathed out the Vedas, and then in the Vedas explains, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sahajagna prajashishva puro prokta prajapati anena prasavi yavam isha yoshvista karmadu. In the beginning of the creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth men and demigods along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this sacrifice, because it will bestow upon you all spiritual and material necessities." In other words, this world is meant for yagya vai Vishnu, for a sacrifice to Vishnu. Whether one sacrifices Vishnu through the Varna ashram system or directly through the Sankirtan movement, the whole idea is to sacrifice for Vishnu. Sacrifice employs three things. The first one is called sambandha, second is abhideya, and third is prayojana. Sacrifice entails knowing what we're sacrificing, knowing what it is, and how to perform the sacrifice, and ultimately what is the objective of the sacrifice. Therefore, in the Varnashram system, although the sacrifice is meant for Vishnu, to please Vishnu, but one pleases Vishnu by following the rules and regulations, either from karma yoga, karma or jnana, or usually goes up to karma and jnana with some element of bhakti, some element of devotion in it. In other words, in the karma system of Varnashram, one learns that everything here belongs to Krishna. Or at least it doesn't belong to us. But in the background is the idea that it belongs to Krishna. But at least, as Chanaka Pandit says, Matrivat paradareshu paradwareshu lostravat atmavat sarabhuteshu yakpashyati sapanditaha. That the first point is that all this material nature, all this material energy, and everyone within it is not our property. That's called detachment or renunciation. Of course, it's not really renunciation. You can't renounce something you don't possess. So this idea of renunciation, that it all belongs to Krishna, it never belonged to us, nor can it belong to us, because we're not controlling anything here. If we were controlling anything here, then fine. Then stop your body from aging for one moment. Try it. Try it real hard. First of all, we had no idea how to do it. And even Hiranyakashipu, who went through an austerity for 100 years of the demigods, couldn't do it. So what to speak of ourselves? It's impossible. Therefore, in the Varnashram system, in the karma part of it, then one does dutiful activities. In other words, one follows Krishna's instructions with the idea it doesn't belong to us. Not attached to the results of the work means that the work is not, nothing belongs to us. So there's no reason to be attached to it. And in the jnana portion, it's with the knowledge that we're not this body, that we're eternal souls. So this is reflected in the Varnashram system. Varnas are meant to gradually give us renunciation so we can come to the platform of knowledge and therefore come to the spiritual understanding. So generally the four Varnas, Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Shudra, they're all meant to perform sacrifice because the Shudras are assistants, the Vaishyas, they grow the food, they get the milk and the ghee for the sacrifice. With the food and the barley in the trade, they get the gold and the other jewels and necessities for the sacrifice. the Kshatriyas gather together the sacrificial material and set up the sacrifice according to the Brahmins' requirements, and the Brahmins perform the sacrifice by chanting the Vedic hymns and offering the ingredients that the Vaishyas, the Shudras, and the Kshatriyas, they collected together and offer them into the sacrifice to satisfy Vishnu. And simply by this renunciation that this doesn't belong to us, it belongs to Vishnu, and therefore we're offering it to Vishnu through the fire sacrifice. And simply by the knowledge that's gained from the Brahmins that how to chant the mantras, in other words, with the proper intonation, with the proper consciousness, so there's an element of elevation of consciousness, at least to the level of Brahman. So by such sacrifices, one becomes liberated. Nasoshiti, nakangshiti, samaksarveshu bhuteshu, madbhaktyam labhate param. The Vaishyas, the Shudras, they give up this hankering and lamentation. And the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, especially the Brahmins, avidya vinaya sampane brahmaniga vihastani, shuni chaiva swapake cha, pandita samadarshana. They see that all living entities are spiritual beings inside a material body, and no matter what body they have, they have the opportunity to assist in the sacrifice, and therefore enjoy the results of the sacrifice called prasadam. And therefore the Govardhan Puj, after the Govardhan Puj sacrifice, everyone got prasadam. Even the animals, the dogs and the lower animals got the prasadam. The Brahmins got the prasadam. Everyone, the outcasts everyone got the prasadam. The result, to spiritually elevate them to spiritual consciousness, to realize that everyone is Krishna's servant and that every body is meant ultimately for liberation from the material world, to help us liberate. Even the animals, their bodies are meant for a gradual evolution towards a human form of life by which one can perform sacrifice for Vishnu. So the whole world is meant for sacrifice for Vishnu. Vishvam Purna Sukhayate. And one who's engaged in sacrifice for Vishnu, he sees everything as the whole universe full of happiness, because everything is meant to help people or encourage people to come and sacrifice for Vishnu, ultimately. Therefore, paradwareshu lostravat, first thing is this world does not belong to us, it belongs to Vishnu, and therefore it's meant for sacrifice. And that sacrifice, the result is not matrivat paradwareshu, matrivat paradwareshu lostrava. So every woman, except for one's wife, to be like one's mother, and every man, except for one's son, to be like, except for one's husband, to be like one's son. So not only we're giving up fruitive activities, but the sense of sense enjoyment. In the ashram system, especially men, to give up the sense of trying to enjoy the material energy. Or regulate it. Regulate the sense gratification, what's necessary, so that one can become liberated from the contamination of material desire, and therefore see things as they actually are. So varnashram dharma is meant for ultimately matrivat paradwareshu losravat atmavat sarvabhuteshu. So we can see all living entities as spiritual beings. That's the perfection of the varnashram system. Therefore one becomes non-envious of any living entity, because in this material world, because we think we're this body, we think we're better than others according to our material body. Probably used to say that someone's driving a Rolls Royce and someone's driving a Ford, or what do they call it? What are those vehicles in India? What's that? Ambassador, yes. So someone's drawing an ambassador, someone's drawing a... Someone is thinking, I'm driving a Rolls Royce, I'm better than someone who's driving an ambassador. So as I said before, this is called aham car. I am the car. But I'm not, we're not the car. We're the passenger of the car. If the president of Slovenia rides an ambassador, it doesn't reduce his position as the president of Slovenia. Or if he rides in a Rolls Royce, it doesn't increase his position as the ambassador of the president of Slovenia. So we're all riding in a car made of material nature, but we ourselves as souls, it doesn't change ourselves as a soul. We always remain in the same position. And ultimately every soul has the exalted opportunity to realize their eternality, to become to full consciousness, and become eternally happy and blissful in their relationship with Krishna. Every living entity, every soul has that opportunity, and it's equal for everyone. And when we attain that position, then we are situated in our own glory, and it doesn't matter what bodies we've had in the past. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever, because every body is ultimately just meant for liberation from our material concept of life and reestablish ourselves in our eternal position. Now in this age, of course, it's obvious we can hardly remember what a brahmachari is, or a grihastha, or a vanaprastha, or a sannyasi. Even to perform the most basic duties is a struggle. Therefore we need a lot of help, and that lot of help, of course, is the Sankirtan movement. Directly, Krishna is descending in the form of his holy name, which is why people perform sacrifice anyhow. If we go up here, we may think they're performing sacrifice, because no one's performing sacrifice in Kali Yuga. There is hardly any sacrifice that works whatsoever. But if you go up to Maharloka even today, they perform sacrifice. And why are they performing the sacrifice? So that Vishnu will appear from the sacrifice and accept their offerings. The bliss they get from the sacrifice is the appearance of Vishnu, not throwing grains in a fire. Throwing ghee in the fire. No, the reason why any sacrifice is that Vishnu will make his appearance. In the upper planetary systems, generally the three deities come to the sacrifices: Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. If they're not there, the sacrifice is really a useless sacrifice. So similarly, we cannot perform Vedic sacrifices. We can perform the sacrifice, so chanting Hare Krishna, and therefore wherever we're doing, if we're chanting Hare Krishna, if we're following the proper procedure of devotional service, then it becomes a sacrifice, as good as if we were sitting there in Treta Yuga, performing the sacrifice with expert Brahmins, chanting the mantras. If we can chant without offense, that's the whole problem, offenses. Otherwise, shnik, shnik, ram, ram, day, 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 hey, kitty, kitty, kitty. The only thing that will appear at the sacrifice is some kitties. Some little cats will come to the sacrifice. But that will not purify us. If we chant Hare Krishna like a child calling for its mother out of love and devotion, feeling dependence and separation from Krishna, then Krishna will be pleased to come to wherever we are, whatever we're doing. Then our life becomes a sacrifice. But because we're not prepared to do that, to chant in that way, because we don't feel so much dependence upon Krishna, as I said before, we don't feel ourselves so fallen. After all, we were born in Europe. Not only that, we're part of the European Union. We're together. We're really together. We have all our economic problems solved. Well, at least we used to. We get food every day. We have shelter. And we used to have gas and electricity. So what do we need Krishna for? What else is there? So this conditioning by modern education that we're all in the Bali concept of life has made us feel independent and not dependent upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because we don't realize our spiritual dependence upon Krishna and even our material dependence upon Krishna. Maybe we'll realize it more now, this winter. People don't even know that rain comes from sacrifice. If we tell people rain comes from sacrifice, they'll put us in an insane asylum. They'll say we're crazy. And sacrifice is born of people's work, and work comes from the Vedas. They think, oh, these people are fanatics. They're religious fanatics. Watch out for them. Krishna Akbar. Therefore, due to this lack of feeling, even understanding, because feeling comes from knowledge. Feeling comes from deep thought, at least spiritual feeling. Without understanding our dependence upon Krishna, we can't feel our dependence upon Krishna, and therefore we can't chant Hare Krishna with feeling. And without understanding how we're not feeling dependence on Krishna, therefore we don't know how we're fallen. Because according to modern standards, we're doing quite well. Prabhupada said that one man is asking another man, are you intelligent? So he's checking his pocket. Oh, here it is. And the man pulls out some money and says, see, I'm intelligent. If you're intelligent, you must have money. Otherwise, you're a fool. So these two things, knowing we're fallen, which comes from the ashram system, when it's trained up from brahmachari life, in humility. When it's not trained up, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you're the greatest, and your life is meant to just enjoy the material world because you were born into a wealthy family, so we'll train you up how to enjoy the material world and lord it over. No, even the kings and the Brahmin sons were sent to the Gurukul, Brahmachari Guru Kule Vasandanta Guru Arhitam, and they were learned dasavan, how to become a servant. Now we go to the people in Slovenia and we tell them we're opening a Gurukul to teach your child how to become a servant. A servant. Servants don't make any money. Who will want to become a dasavan? Nichavo. We'll teach your child how to feel fallen. That's what we're trying to. He's already mentally depressed. That's why we're giving him drugs. He already has an inferiority complex. So people will not appreciate that the brahmachari system is meant to teach the student how to become humble and work as a menial servant for the spiritual master, for the big chief exploitation of the kids, child abuse. Hey kid, go and collect some wood. Wait, I'm God, I'm Krishna. Okay, I'll do it anyhow. Even Krishna and Sudama, they went and collect wood in the forest. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, just to show an example. And then one becomes a grihastha. If one is not successful, completely successful in the brahmachari ashram, then one becomes a grihastha. Now, generally speaking, if one is successful in the brahmachari ashram, then in the modern society, then he becomes a grihameti. If one is successful in school, he becomes a grihameti and gets unlimited wealth to gratify his senses. Buy 15 cars and 5 houses, then he's doing it. he got good training in school. But if one is not successful, if one is successful as a brahmachari, then one becomes a complete renunciate. Exactly the opposite of what modern society is trying to train the children. So no wonder our society, our Krishna consciousness, we have a hard time understanding it. And what to speak of general people? They think we're, they think we're a bunch of innocent people who have no brains and therefore go around just saying the same thing over and over again. But at least they're enthusiastic and they're colorful and therefore no harm. Anyone who just keeps on saying the same words over and over again, how can they be of any harm? Besides that, they're so poor, they can't even afford clothes. They wake up in the morning and they put on their bed sheets and they go out and repeat the same words over and over again. So it's the exact opposite of what they're trying to achieve. And what to speak of, if the grihastha life is successful, then they retire and they go to Hawaii and play chess and shuffleboard every day and live life and gratifying their senses. And then at the end of life, they renounce all religion. As Krishna says, sarva dharman parityajya, give up all varieties of religion. They reach the perfection. They become complete atheists and demons. And at the time of death, even if someone comes and says, chant Hare Krishna, they say, I cannot say so many words. The exact opposite of what the varnashram system is meant for. That the grihastas, dhanam, dhammas, yajnas cha, that if they're trained up as a brahmachari, then they know they continue on with sacrifice in the grihastha ashram, giving in charity, and also sense and mind control. They further practice it. And then they're able to perform tapasya and meditate upon Krishna and become a perfect sannyasi, fearless because they realize they're eternal servants of Krishna, and they have knowledge of Krishna, knowledge of Brahman, they have knowledge of Paramatma, and they're pure in their habits. Everything they do strengthens their spiritual development. Therefore, one can come to the platform of Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Suridam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatvamam Shantim Richete. Instead of just understanding everything here doesn't belong to me, we'll know it belongs to Krishna. And it's all meant for Krishna's pleasure because he's the Bhoktaram. And if we please Krishna, then everyone becomes benefited. Just like when you water the root of the tree, all the water goes to the leaves and branches, or by providing food to the stomach, the nutrition goes to all the different parts of the body. So by pleasing Krishna, everyone becomes blissful and enlightened. And Krishna, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, Krishna is the eternal friend of everyone. Whatever we have now is simply because Krishna is giving it to us. And if we take shelter of Krishna, he can give him himself personally, which is the greatest treasure. Eternal loving relation with Krishna, and therefore a loving relation with all his devotees. So that's, since we can't perform the physical yajna, which is helpful for bringing Vishnu in our lives, therefore the Sankirtan movement is there if one likes to read and explain things, and one can work as a Brahmin to serve Krishna and explain how Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if one likes to manage and organize things, one can manage the Sankirtan movement so that the holy name can be spread and the glories of Krishna can be spread everywhere. And if one has money, resources, then that can be given to the managers so that the preaching can go on. And therefore, this is the sacrifice in this age. And everyone else can assist in the Sankirtan movement. And that way, one can learn how to utilize whatever resources we have and utilize them in Krishna service, and that will help us chant Hare Krishna with understanding our dependency upon Krishna and our necessity to get out of our material conceptions of life. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you. Nam lahko prosim date kakšen nasvet, kako se lahko osvobodimo zavisti?
If we can get some advice how to get rid of envy.
Envy? Chant Hare Krishna. No, envy is just because we don't understand things, that's all. So if we want to understand things properly, then we can read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, chant Hare Krishna, which will reveal, help us depend upon Krishna, so he reveals what he's saying in Bhagavad Gita, that everyone is the same, everyone is a spiritual being. Therefore, why should we be envious of everyone? What does anyone have that we should be envious of? Can you name something that, why would we be envious of anyone? If you realize you were eternal, if you realize that everyone else was eternal, if you realize that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that you have a personal relationship with him, as everyone else does, and that Krishna is our best friend, that he becomes the devotee of his devotee. If we become his devotee, he becomes our devotee. What more could you want? Why should we want everyone to have that, the best? And Krishna is the best. Could you tell me why anyone would be envious if we had knowledge, if they had knowledge? Envy is just due to ignorance, because of our conditioned nature. Of course, we came here out of enviousness. We want to imitate Krishna. So that's the main difficulty of becoming Krishna conscious. We have to give up our wanting to be Krishna rather than serve Krishna, love Krishna, and be loved by Krishna. So we have to get the taste of devotion, of being loved by Krishna, serving Krishna and being loved by Krishna and loving Krishna. Then we'll see it's much better than being envious of Krishna. Because we're never going to fit into every atom anyhow, as Krishna does, everywhere. We're always going to be a little tiny soul. So since we're a little tiny soul eternally, we might as well accept it. And if we don't accept it, then we'll be suffering eternally. Anything else? Does that answer your question? Yeah, the Hare Krishna movement is usually a disappointment. People come, they think they're going to become God, and then after some time when they make a little advancement, they realize Krishna is God eternally, and he has that position, and no one can, he never gets removed from it. He never gets old, so he has to retire. He never gets elected out of office. The spiritual world is not a democracy. The cowherd boys get together and decide some other cowherd boy should become God for some time. That's not how it works. But they're all happy because Krishna acts like a regular cowherd boy. He doesn't generally act as God. He acts as just another cowherd boy. And everyone loves Krishna because he's the most lovable. That's what makes him God in Goloka Vrindavan at least, because he's unlimitedly lovable, and therefore everyone wants to serve him because he's so lovable. Not that he's such a big controller there. Matter of fact, everyone else usually is controlling him. But because he's so lovable, everyone wants to serve him. Anything else? Hvala Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande.